Alarms blared as the city descended into chaos. Screams echoed through the streets, mingling with the roar of panicked crowds fleeing for their lives. Amidst the mayhem, a lone figure sprinted down the crumbling sidewalk, his breath ragged, his eyes wild with terror. This was no ordinary disaster. It was the stuff of nightmares. The dead had risen, their once familiar faces now twisted into ghastly, snarling masks. These were no mere zombies. They were monstrosities, mutated by some unknown force, their movements fluid and unnatural, their hunger insatiable. The man's name was Michael, and he had been caught in the heart of the outbreak. One moment, he had been grabbing a quick lunch from his favorite deli. The next, he was running for his life, the streets erupting into utter pandemonium around him. Asterisk gotta get out of here. Asterisk, he thought, his mind racing as he dodged abandoned cars and debris. Asterisk, find a safe place, regroup, figure out what the hell is going on. Asterisk. Rounding a corner, Michael skidded to a halt, his blood turning to ice. A horde of the creatures, dozens strong, blocked his path, their hollow eyes fixed on him with unwavering hunger. Panic seized him, his heart pounding in his ears as he frantically searched for an escape route. Asterisk no. No, no. Asterisk, he breathed, backpedaling as the zombies advanced, their guttural moans sending shivers down his spine. Suddenly, a shattering sound pierced the air, and Michael watched in horror as the window of a nearby storefront exploded outward. A figure came hurtling through the shattered glass, landing in a graceful crouch just a few feet away. It was a woman, her dark hair wild, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. Without a moment's hesitation, she swept up a discarded baseball bat and charged towards the horde, her movements a blur of lethal precision. Michael could only stare in stunned amazement as she danced among the zombies, her bat a blur as she bashed in skulls and shattered jaws. The creatures fell one by one, their unnaturally enhanced bodies no match for her lightning-fast strikes. Asterisk, come on. Asterisk, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Asterisk. This way, asterisk. Michael didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted after her, his legs pumping as they wove through the streets, the dying screams of the zombies fading in the distance. They finally came to a stop in an alleyway, panting heavily. Michael leaned against the wall, his heart racing, his mind reeling from the sheer intensity of what he had just witnessed. Asterisk, oh, are you? Asterisk, he managed to ask, his voice ragged. The woman turned to face him, her expression grim. Asterisk, my name is Sarah. Asterisk, she replied. Asterisk, and we need to get out of this city. Fast. These things, they're not like anything I've ever seen before. They're evolving, adapting, becoming more dangerous by the minute. If we don't find a way to escape, we're as good as dead. Asterisk. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. The way she spoke, the stark urgency in her voice, it was clear that the situation was far more dire than he could have imagined. Asterisk, what's happening? Asterisk, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. Asterisk, I don't know. Asterisk, she admitted. Asterisk, but one thing's for certain. We're in the fight of our lives. And we can't trust anyone. Asterisk. With that, she turned and began to move deeper into the alley, her grip tightening on the bat. Michael had no choice but to follow, his mind racing with 1,000 questions, and a growing sense of dread that he might not survive long enough to get any answers. The alleyway was a maze of shadows and debris, the air thick with the acrid stench of smoke and decay. Michael followed Sarah in tense silence, his heart pounding in his ears as they navigated the treacherous path. Suddenly, a guttural moan pierced the gloom, and Michael felt his blood run cold. One of the mutated zombies emerged from the darkness, its rotting features twisted into a snarling grimace. Without hesitation, Sarah swung her bat, the metal colliding with the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. Asterisk, keep moving. Asterisk, she barked, her voice laced with urgency. They pressed on, the sounds of the undead growing louder all around them. Michael could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end, his senses heightened to a razor's edge. As they rounded a corner, Sarah held up a hand, signaling him to stop. Peering cautiously around the edge of the wall, she surveyed the scene before them. A narrow street choked with overturned vehicles and the lurching forms of the mutated zombies. Asterisk Dan it, asterisk, she muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. Asterisk, too many of them. We'll have to find another way. Asterisk. Turning to Michael, she fixed him with a piercing gaze. Asterisk, listen to me, asterisk, she said, her voice low and intense. Asterisk. These things are not like the zombies you've seen in the movies. They're faster, stronger, and more unpredictable. They've evolved somehow, and I don't know what that means for us. Asterisk. Michael felt a chill run down his spine, the gravity of their situation weighing heavily on him. Asterisk, what are we going to do? Asterisk, he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Sarah's expression hardened, her grip tightening on the bat. Asterisk, we fight, asterisk, she said. Asterisk, and we survive. No matter what. Asterisk. Without another word, she turned and led the way down a narrow side street, her movements quick and sure-footed. Michael followed close behind, his senses on high alert, every muscle in his body tense and ready to react. As they moved deeper into the maze of alleys and abandoned buildings, the air grew thick with the stench of death, and the eerie silence was shattered by the occasional scream or the gut-wrenching howls of the mutated zombies. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. The shadows seemed to press in around them, and he couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that they were trapped, with no way out. Just as the thought crossed his mind, a sudden movement caught his eye. A figure, lurching towards them from the gloom. Michael tensed, his heart racing, but before he could react, Sarah was already in motion, her bat swinging with deadly precision. The zombie collapsed in a lifeless heap, and Michael felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by a growing sense of unease. If these creatures could appear out of nowhere, then they were never truly safe. They were trapped, with no escape in sight. Sarah led Michael through the maze of alleys, her movements quick and deliberate. The ominous silence was broken only by the distant, unsettling cries of the mutated zombies echoing through the deserted streets. As they navigated the treacherous path, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the shadows themselves were alive and waiting to swallow them whole. His heart pounded in his chest, and his senses were heightened, scanning every corner for any sign of danger. Suddenly, Sarah held up her hand, signaling him to stop. She peered cautiously around the corner, her brow furrowed in concentration. Asterisk. There's a safe house up ahead. Asterisk, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Asterisk. It's our best chance to regroup and figure out a way out of this hellhole. Asterisk. Michael nodded, his throat tight with apprehension. He followed closely as Sarah led the way, her grip tightening on the baseball bat with each step. As they approached the safe house, the air grew thick with tension. The once familiar building had been transformed, its windows boarded up and its doors barricaded. Michael could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon them, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Sarah paused, her gaze scanning the area for any signs of movement. Satisfied that the coast was clear, she moved towards the door, pounding on it with her fist. Asterisk, open up. Asterisk, she called out, her voice urgent. Asterisk. It's Sarah. I've got a survivor with me. Asterisk. There was a moment of tense silence, and then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door creaked open, and a grizzled-looking man peered out, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Asterisk, Sarah. Asterisk, he said, his voice gruff. Asterisk, pose your friend. Asterisk. Asterisk, this is Michael. Asterisk, Sarah replied, her tone clipped. Asterisk. He's with me. Now, are you going to let us in, or are we going to be zombie chow out here? Asterisk. The man hesitated for a heartbeat, his gaze darting between Sarah and Michael. Finally, he stepped aside, nodding tersely. Asterisk, get in. Quick. Asterisk, he said, his voice low. Sarah and Michael hurried inside, the door slamming shut behind them. As they stepped into the dimly lit interior, Michael felt a sense of relief wash over him. At least, for the moment, they were safe. But the respite was short-lived. As they moved deeper into the safe house, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and the other survivors eyed them with a mix of wariness and distrust. Asterisk, what's going on? Asterisk, Sarah asked, her voice sharp. The grizzled man sighed, his expression grim. Asterisk, we've got a problem, asterisk, he said. Asterisk, one of our own has been infected. Asterisk. Michael felt a chill run down his spine, the realization dawning on him that their fight for survival had only just begun. The air inside the safe house was thick with tension as Sarah and Michael faced the grizzled man. Asterisk, what do you mean? One of your own has been infected. Asterisk, Sarah demanded, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. The man's expression was grave as he replied. Asterisk, earlier today, one of our group went on a supply run. When he came back, he was acting strange, disoriented. We didn't think much of it at first, but then... Asterisk, he paused, his jaw tightening. Asterisk. He attacked one of the others. We had to subdue him, and that's when we realized he'd been bitten. Asterisk. Michael felt a cold knot of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. The implications of what the man was saying were clear, and the tension in the room was palpable. Asterisk, where is he now? Asterisk, Sarah asked, her voice low and intense. Asterisk, locked in one of the back rooms. Asterisk, the man replied. Asterisk, we're trying to figure out what to do. Asterisk. Sarah's gaze swept the room, taking in the wary faces of the other survivors. Michael could see the gears turning in her mind, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Asterisk, okay. Asterisk, she said, her voice steady. Asterisk, here's what we're going to do. We need to secure this place, make sure there's no way for that thing to get out. And then we need to decide what to do with him. Asterisk. The other survivors shifted uncomfortably, murmurs of agreement and dissent rippling through the group. Michael could feel the fear and uncertainty in the air, the sense that their fragile sanctuary was crumbling around them. As Sarah began issuing orders, Michael couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The way the other survivors looked at him and Sarah, the undercurrent of distrust, it was clear that they were not entirely welcome. Asterisk, what if he escapes? Asterisk, one of the survivors, a woman with a haunted expression, spoke up. Asterisk, what if he turns and we can't stop him? Asterisk. Asterisk, we'll deal with that if it happens. Asterisk, Sarah replied, her tone brooking no argument. Asterisk, right now, our priority is keeping this place secure. We can't afford to panic. Asterisk. Michael could see the desperation in the woman's eyes, the primal fear that threatened to overwhelm them all. He knew that they were all teetering on the edge, one wrong move away from chaos. As the survivors scrambled to fortify the safe house, Michael found himself drawn to the locked door at the back of the building. The muffled sounds of the infected survivors' movements sent shivers down his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their fragile refuge was about to be shattered. He turned to Sarah, his voice low. Asterisk, what if he gets out? Asterisk, he asked, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Sarah's gaze met his, her expression grim. Asterisk. Then we do what we have to. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk. And pray we all make it out of this alive. Asterisk. The weight of her words settled heavily on Michael's shoulders, and he knew that their fight for survival had only just begun. The survivors worked tirelessly to fortify the safe house, barricading windows and reinforcing the doors. The air was thick with tension, the sound of hammers and scraping furniture punctuated by the occasional muffled thud from the locked room where the infected survivor was being held. Michael found himself drawn to that door, his heart pounding as he listened to the monstrous sounds coming from within. The thought of that creature, once human, now transformed into a mindless, bloodthirsty predator, sent a chill down his spine. As he stood there, Sarah approached him, her expression grave. We need to talk, she said, her voice low. Michael nodded, following her to a secluded corner of the safe house. The other survivors eyed them warily, their distrust palpable. What is it? Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's gaze was unflinching as she replied, we can't keep him contained for long. These things, they're evolving, becoming stronger and more unpredictable. It's only a matter of time before he breaks free. Michael felt his stomach drop, the weight of her words sinking in. What are you saying? He asked, already dreading the answer. We have to end this, Sarah said, her voice tinged with regret. For the safety of everyone here, we need to put him down. Before he becomes a threat we can't control. Michael's mind raced, the implications of what she was suggesting dawning on him. You mean, kill him? He asked, his voice trembling. Sarah nodded, her expression etched with remorse. I know it's a horrible thing to ask, she said. But we can't take the risk. Not with what's at stake. Michael felt a surge of nausea, the thought of taking a human life, even one that had been so horribly transformed, turning his stomach. But he could see the logic in Sarah's words, the grim necessity of their situation. What if? What if there's another way? He asked, grasping at straws. Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with a deep, weary resignation. I wish there was. She said. But we're running out of options. We have to act, and we have to act now. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but the sound of a loud crash suddenly filled the air, followed by a chorus of horrified screams. The infected survivor had broken free. Chaos erupted in the safe house as the infected survivor burst through the door, his once human features contorted into a grotesque mask of rage and hunger. The other survivors scrambled to defend themselves, grabbing whatever weapons they could find. Hammers, crowbars, even broken furniture legs. Michael watched in horror as the creature advanced, its movements fluid and unnatural. It seemed to defy the laws of physics, twisting and contorting its body in ways no human should be able to. The other survivors swung their makeshift weapons, but their strikes seemed to have little effect on the mutated monstrosity. Sarah sprang into action, her baseball bat ablur as she struck the creature with savage precision. Michael could see the determination in her eyes, the unwavering resolve to protect the others, even as the infected survivor shrugged off her blows. Fet back. Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Call hold it off, The other survivors scrambled to obey, their faces etched with terror. Michael found himself rooted to the spot, his mind reeling as he watched the battle unfold before him. The infected survivor let out an unearthly howl, its gaze fixed on Sarah with primal, undiluted hunger. It lunged at her, its movements so fast that Michael could barely follow them. Sarah danced and weaved, her bat a deadly extension of her own body, but the creature seemed to anticipate her every move. As the two combatants traded blows, Michael caught a glimpse of the infected survivor's eyes, once human, now devoid of any semblance of humanity. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that this was no longer a person, but a walking nightmare, driven by an insatiable, animalistic craving for flesh and blood. Suddenly, the creature landed a devastating blow, knocking Sarah to the ground. She cried out in pain, her bat clattering to the floor, and Michael felt his heart sink. Asterisk no. Asterisk, he shouted, his voice hoarse with desperation. Without thinking, he grabbed the nearest weapon, a sturdy length of pipe, and charged towards the infected survivor, his mind racing with a single desperate thought. Asterisk, I have to save her. Asterisk. The creature turned to face him, its jaws gaping wide, and Michael steeled himself, raising the pipe high above his head. In that moment, time seemed to slow down, and Michael knew that he was about to face the fight of his life. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he charged towards the mutated creature, the makeshift weapon gripped tightly in his hands. The infected survivor turned its horrifying gaze towards him, its twisted features contorted into a snarl of primal hunger. As the beast lunged forward, Michael swung the pipe with all his might, the metal colliding with the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. The infected survivor staggered, momentarily stunned, and Michael pressed his advantage, raining down blow after blow. The other survivors, emboldened by Michael's bravery, joined the fray, their own weapons striking the creature with renewed vigor. But even as it was battered and bloodied, the infected survivor refused to go down, its unnatural resilience a testament to the horrifying transformation it had undergone. Michael felt his arms grow heavy, the strain of the relentless assault taking its toll. The creature's movements were growing more erratic, its strikes becoming more desperate, and Michael knew that he couldn't keep up this pace forever. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught his eye, and he watched in awe as Sarah, her face contorted with determination, charged back into the fray. With a mighty heave, she swung her bat, the metal connecting with the infected survivor's neck in a sickening crunch. The creature's head snapped to the side, and for a moment it seemed to freeze, its eyes wide with a twisted semblance of surprise. Then, with a final gurgling moan, it collapsed to the ground, unmoving. The safe house fell silent, save for the ragged breaths of the exhausted survivors. Michael stared at the lifeless husk of the infected creature, his mind reeling from the sheer brutality of what he had just witnessed. Sarah approached him, her expression grim. Asterisk, you did good, asterisk, she said, her voice low. Asterisk, but this is only the beginning. We need to get out of this city before more of those things show up. Asterisk. Michael nodded, the weight of their situation settling heavily on his shoulders. As the other survivors began to regroup, he couldn't help but wonder what horrors awaited them beyond the walls of their fragile sanctuary. One thing was certain. The fight for survival had only just begun, and the road ahead would be paved with unimaginable challenges and gut-wrenching choices. The safe house was in disarray, the survivors huddled together in the aftermath of their brutal confrontation with the mutated zombie. Michael stood beside Sarah, his grip tightening on the makeshift pipe he had used to defend her. Asterisk, we need to get out of here, asterisk, Sarah said, her voice low and urgent. Asterisk, that thing wasn't alone. There are more out there, and they're getting stronger by the minute. Asterisk. The other survivors exchanged worried glances, the weight of their situation bearing down on them. Asterisk. But where do we go? Asterisk, one of the men asked, his voice trembling. Asterisk. The city is overrun. We're trapped. Asterisk. Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing with determination. Asterisk, we have to try asterisk, she said. Asterisk, staying here is a death sentence. We need to find a way out, no matter the cost. Asterisk. Michael felt a chill run down his spine at the implication in her words. He knew that the cost of survival could be steep, that they might have to make impossible choices to escape this nightmare. As the survivors began to gather their meager supplies, Michael caught sight of a weathered map tacked to the wall. His eyes scanned the faded lines, searching for a potential escape route. Asterisk, what about this? Asterisk, he said, pointing to a road on the outskirts of the city. Asterisk. That looks like it leads out of the urban area. Maybe we can find a way through. Asterisk. Sarah stepped closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. Asterisk, it's worth a shot, asterisk, she said. Asterisk. It's better than staying here and waiting to be overrun. Asterisk. With a renewed sense of purpose, the survivors began to fortify themselves, gathering weapons and preparing for the perilous journey ahead. Michael felt a glimmer of hope, but he knew that the road would be fraught with danger. As they made their way out of the safe house, Michael couldn't help but glance back at the lifeless husk of the mutated zombie, a shiver of dread running down his spine. He knew that they were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered, one that was evolving, adapting, and becoming more deadly with each passing moment. But he also knew that they had no choice but to confront this nightmare, to fight for their lives and their freedom, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, he turned and followed Sarah, his resolve hardening with each step. The battle for survival was far from over, but they were determined to escape this city of the dead, even if it meant facing the most terrifying and unpredictable foes they had ever known.